season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
Hello and welcome to the Vancouver International Boat Show virtual seminar series, sponsored by Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales, the premier choice for exploring the passion of yachting. Thank you for joining us. The seminar will begin in 1 moment. If you are having technical difficulties, you can reach me, the online moderator, via the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions for our speaker can be added in the Q&A box, also at the bottom of your screen, and questions will be answered after the slide presentation. It is our pleasure to present Cruising for Couples with Liza Copeland. Over to you, Liza.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. That's great. Well, it's a gorgeous day here in Vancouver. I've just zipped my grandson up in his wetsuit. He's on the race team. And maybe some others of you will be going sailing today. It's the joy of living on the West Coast. So cruising for couples. And wow, there's some ups and downs of cruising with couples, and I want to go through them, try to get everything in harmony, as they say. This picture was taken in Brazil, in Marajó Island, in the middle of the Amazon Delta, and it's carnival. And I think I probably just said, let's go on the night march where you throw mud at one another. And my husband is literally, not again, some crazy plan. So here we go. So people get into sailing quite often. They get in when they're young, but quite a lot of people, and very often the people I find that come to the seminar, are coming into the boating world later in life. And they're trying to convince their partner this is a great thing to do. And you soon find that expectations can vary. Whereas they dream of getting away. Apparently, this is what every man dreams of, is at the end of the sunset, even in the Arctic. Whereas women say, well, I'm looking forward to comfort, particularly in my retirement. And so boating, it doesn't sound very comfortable. I'm giving up my washing machine, my car, all my handy helpers. And is this going to be my fashion statement from here on in? Maybe I don't think so. So there's a bit of adjustment to do. And the adjustment comes even further for people who want to go into the ocean, because it might be fine to sail into the sunset tonight. But for most women, it's, yes, well, that was okay, but what's going to be tomorrow night? So you have to look at the fun sides of boating, and the fun side is the wonderful people you meet, the wonderful other boaters, the adventures you have together. This is actually in Turkey, going up the Kaunas River. A whole bunch of us all from Vancouver went over there and chartered a boat. And it's just amazing the friendships you form when you're in your own boat or you're away. And everyone is in this adventurous lifestyle. You get together for wonderful gatherings on other boats. I think 22 of us on this boat have been to 57. We hadn't seen the couple who owned it for 20 years. It didn't make any difference at all. So what about relationships on board? We've all heard of some nightmares, and people get in very much to pink and blue roles, I find, on boats, people who've been boating a long time. I remember doing a ladies' race when I was over in England, and I had a couple of other women as crew. And this one woman, I thought, wow, I wonder why she's crewing me. She's always seems to be on the race course. Anyway, we had a really fun day. And she kept on saying, tell me what to do. And I said, well, I can tell you what to do, but I want you to know why you're doing it. And at the end of the day, she said, I can't thank you enough. I learned more today about sailing than I have for 30 years, just racing and being told what to do. So this seminar is all about everyone knowing what to do. So you all need to enjoy the life. So you need to come and understand that the different tolerance levels of people. Discomfort, strength can come an issue on sailboats. If you don't have some extra helpers, we can get extra electric winches now, or winch handles. It can be a lot of extra work. What about seasickness? And unfortunately, women apparently do get more seasick than men. The fear factor can be come into effect. And then the raised voices that you probably heard, particularly coming into the dock, you know, the jump, 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 as the boat ever increasingly gets further from the dock. And really it's the problem with the person at the helm, but a person who hasn't jumped gets the blame. And there can be a lot of anger and resentment that goes around that. And then for some reason, men always sort of are very exclusive. It's my boat, my plan. Someone said to me once, I've suddenly become the third person in our relationship. So what are the basic skills? How can you become more equal in this? Well, know your fundamental boating, sailing skills, your seamanship, we always used to call it, and also what works for you, and to have confidence in what works for you. Docking and anchoring, definitely the biggest conflict with couples. A practice certainly helps, and never when your friends are on the dock or giving you different directions. Reading a nautical chart, that means an electronic chart or a paper chart, a hydrographic chart. Using the radio, the VHF, know what DSC is, which is the emergency aspect of the radio if you are in trouble. Accessing and interpreting weather, obviously, is number one. And being independent from the dinghy, you know, if you always have to wait for a ride to get ashore, it really limits you. And maybe have an extra form of flotation, like a kayak or something like that you can use instead. Practice definitely going out in sailboats, going out maybe in that wind that you normally would avoid, but just making sure, you know, everything works on the boat and when to reef and how to reef. Mutual respect. One of the things that was always interesting between my husband and myself was when the wind comes up and when do you need to reef? Well, actually, if you're racing, you know, if the boat is heeled more than 15 degrees, it only goes slower and you stress everything. But men somehow like being over on their ear, you know, the exhilaration. But over on your ear soon becomes out of control. And we women don't have the strength that a lot of men have to kind of get out of that situation. So understanding, you know, I have a certain tolerance level. I reef probably a wee bit earlier than Andy. On the other hand, when the wind goes down, he also wants to put the engine on at 5 knots, and I'll go down to 4 knots of sailing because I like sailing so much. So that's what each of us do. And then partnership in decision-making on board. And that can be from choosing gear when you're maybe going north and now you need to put on extra equipment like radar, and make sure you've got good heaters on the boat or canvas covers, to buying the boat in the first place. And the boats are all a compromise. You know, if you're a sailor, it's are you going to go to more of a motor sailor aspect, or you're going to go to a really great racing boat that has less room. And then, of course, there are different size powerboats and the different way they behave, whether it's a trawler and it's slower, or whether it's a high-speed boat that pounds all the way up the coast. Okay, so learning to sail. I mean, there are lots of fun places. The top picture on the right here is in the Balearic Islands, actually Minorca, the Virgin Islands, when you can go to them when COVID is over, a wonderful area where you can charter and learn to sail. And the good thing about going on a boat like that is it's got gear that works. They don't want breakdowns on their charter boats. So this gear works, whether you're looking at the anchoring system, whether you're looking at the sheeting arrangement, maybe down below what they've got. Cats are becoming increasingly popular. They supposedly are flat, not quite, but they give quite a jerky ride. And anyone who gets seasick should consider going in a really rough sea before they buy one, but they do give you a lot of extra room. So there are pros and cons, as I say, in all boats. So actually learning to sail is not that difficult, especially for cruising, not like the fine tune of the race course. But there are some hazards, and this situation is one of the biggest hazards when you're going with the wind behind you, downwind. The DDW, as people call it, dead downwind. And if the wind just gets the wrong side of the mainsail, that boom will flip over, and that's when heads get bashed. And my husband, who lacks hair on top of his head, sure has a lot of scars from doing that inadvertently in racing. This is the way we sailed half the world, I have to say, with our pole out wing on wing with our jenny out one side and main the other, and it's very stable. You can have boom brakes on the main, and that will help stop the jibe as well. If the wind is on the side of the boat, you're going to have that mainsail half out, which is 45 degrees instead of the 90. And of course, you can't go dead into wind, so you tack up to wind. If you feel you have very little experience compared to your partner, do go and take a course by yourself. There's no doubt that if you go with other people at the same stage and maybe a 22-foot boat that's still a little keel boat, it's very manageable strength-wise, maneuvering-wise, and you will learn a lot of techniques. Now, those techniques may not be the same ones as your partner uses, so then you've got to combine actually which works best for you as a couple. Steering the boat. I've seen a lot of people exhausted steering the boat at sea because they're overturning all the time. Actually, when you get in the groove, you just barely need to move the wheel. So being at sea is one thing. I really love steering at sea. We have an auto helm, although if we get what we call a quartering sea that's just off astern, it's hard on the battery. And so we tend to steer, or maybe we have the wind vane up. You can see we have a hydro vane behind. Steering in an anchorage can be tricky. People have long mooring lines. More and more people have chain now, so they don't have so much line on. But still, some people have rode and chain. So you need to be really sure you're not snagging an anchor as you go around looking for your spot. So this terminology, and I have some girlfriends who say, I'm always going to call the galley the kitchen and the head the bathroom, and that's just fine. But there are many other words that actually you hear all the time on the dock, and they are useful words. And we all know the hull, the top sides, keel, rudder, deck, bow and stern, or forward and aft. Then we get to port and starboard. So port, if you're facing forward, is on your left side. So it's 4 letters, and so is port, a very easy way of using it. But don't shy away if you're from a tricky situation of saying left or right, because we're very instinctive left or right, and sometimes we do default to that. But basically port and starboard. And windward leeward, if the wind is on the port side, that's the windward side. If the wind is on the starboard side, that's the windward side, and the other side's leeward. If the wind comes on the starboard side, you're on starboard tack and you've got the right of way. So mast boom. Now, what is the vang, or in some parts of the world called the kicking strap? The vang stops that boom from flying up in the air. So it just holds it at right angles to the mast, which keeps it in control, keeps a good shape to the sail. Standing rigging is the rigging that holds the mast up. So most boats will have a forestay, a backstay, and 2 stays at the side called shrouds. The running rigging is the lines that pull the sails in or up. You've got the different mainsails, beat, reach, run. I just covered that. A beat close to the wind, reach on the side, run, wind behind you. And that, incidentally, although you're not using it if you're a powerboat, you'll be better angles on your boat in powerboats. So if you're crossing the strait and there's a strong wind, you might find that there are better angles to the wind for your powerboat that keep the powerboat in more control. Whereas maybe dead downwind is a bit of a rocky ride and you feel unstable. So check all that out. The wind is still important, even if you're in a powerboat. Below, the companionway. Apparently in old days, that stairwell going down was the only place you could meet a companion, which is why it's called that. The sole is the floor, deckhead is the ceiling, the galley, the berths, the lockers. The spinnaker is called the chute, that big billowy colourful sail, and the spinnaker pole that holds it down. You have certain lines on it too, sheets and guys, and a downhold with the pole down, and spinnakers are certainly, you need to know a bit about sailing before you fly them. They're a lot of fun, but while you can get out of control. So now we get on to docking, and while it's a tricky thing, docking, you can come in, you think you've got the perfect angle, you can get oh, I don't know, a puff of wind, or you can get some current taking you in the wrong direction. And suddenly it is no longer the golden angle that it seemed to be. So what are you going to do about it? This picture, by the way, is taken in Capri, a lovely island at Capri. I'm right at the top at Anna Capri looking down. And just to tell you some of the tricks quickly, we're one of these 4 boats, actually we're the second one in here. And as you see, there's a big marina, but it was €200 a night. But we learned, and there's often something to learn when you go ashore and talk to other cruisers, that if you go into the fuel dock at 6 o'clock when they close, you can stay there free for the night, so long as you leave by 6 in the morning. So, of course, all the boats and more converged on the fuel dock. But no, we had a good evening, good party. So, Rose, are you going to be at the wheel or deck? Actually, it's good for people to be able to be both. You get a very different perspective about what's going on. Routine, what makes sense for you? I have to say that with my husband and I, we've changed routines. I used to always be at the helm. I kind of took ownership of docking. I like it. And Andy would lead for shore. But now he's had several back surgeries. He's not as mobile. So it makes much more sense for me to be the one to lead for shore. He's also, having been a fighter pilot, deaf, so he can't communicate with people on shore as well. So whatever works for you and makes sense. Using a spring line, if you can get that midship line attached. It's great if a dock has a cleat, because you can often actually lasso that cleat, and it just means you've got control of your boat. Your boat is not going to go forward, and particularly if you had to dock downwind, which of course you want to dock into wind to get more control. Reversing is really important. It's important in anchoring as well, because virtually every boat, unless you have dual engines and you can manipulate it, will have a prop walk. That means you're going back. The stern of the boat at low speed will flip one way or the other. A lot of sailboats happen to be to port, but not all. So it makes it much easier if your prop walk is to port. If you can come in port side too, because you come in at an angle, and when you go in reverse, of course, your stern now walks to port, so it actually comes alongside the dock, and that's when everyone gives you a good cheer, and it's very rewarding. If you go in the starboard side, your stern's going to go away from the dock, so you've either got to get a lot of speed up to get more control, or do a much better docking job. If you've got space, you can do it, but if you're tight between two boats, so prop walk, very important. Calling a marina ahead for tips is really useful. You know what side you're going to be coming alongside. You can set up all your lines and everything else early. And do be careful with those lines. I've seen so many people coming in. It's a tricky situation, doing a splendid throw of their lines, and it just soars into oblivion because actually they haven't tied it to the cleat yet. So check everything very carefully. Rushing is never good. And by the way, if any of you book locally in this area and in many other places now, Ontario as well, you'll probably go through an app called Swift Harbour, and that will send you a marina plan as well as where you're going. And so you have a whole map of the marina. So practice, practice, practice. It makes so much a difference. And do accept that mistakes happen. You know, my husband, having been in the Navy, it had to be right first time. Well, sometimes it just isn't. And so just go around again. Don't feel embarrassed about it. Or ask for help. So anchors, wow, there's so much choice. And I'm sure if you read traditional stories, you read all about Bruces and CQRs. We certainly went around the world with those. They both have their merits. It's funny, the Bruce was wonderful until it wasn't. And the CQR we used, and it was wonderful, and it wasn't. There's certain bottoms that they hold well in and others they don't. A Bruce, particularly in corally areas, if it gets a lump of coral in it, isn't great. But now we have the new generation anchors, and the spade type anchors, and there are many, the Bugle, the Manson, the Rockner, the spade, the Saka, whatever. The Rockner is built in Canada. It seems to really have taken over the market, and certainly we have one, and we just never drag with it. A couple of times had a problem getting it up. It's so good, but it's great. So never go too small with your anchor for the size of your boat. And you do need, if you go up north, a good robust second anchor, because you might have to come back for your anchor. You might have to put a a buoy on it because it's stuck under an old log or an old chain or something to do with the logging boom. I think all of us who've gone up north have had that in one time or another. And if it's too deep to dive, then you need to get someone to rescue it. Okay, so anchoring, you use your prop walk again. So when you're coming up and you find your perfect spot in your anchorage, if you do flip to have that prop walk to port, if you flip the bow to port before you, so you come up dead into wind, and then just before the anchor goes down, you flip that bow to port. When you put throttle on to go astern, you will line up and go dead downwind. And if you're dead downwind, you've got control of the boat. And you also know where you're going to end up much more quickly. Don't go back too quickly. Many people now have anchor windlasses where it lets out, it's a mechanical let out of the anchor, and you can see some anchors just skipping over the water because someone's zooming backwards in reverse and going much more quickly than the chain is being eased. So positions again. Location in the anchorage is going to be really important. Of course, a lot locally here, you do a lot of stern too, so you need to think about that too. The communication. We always used to laugh. There's some wonderful headsets around, and there was a particular headset sold by Canadians, and it was foolproof. It was terrific. But people learned that you were all on one frequency. And of course, certain couples get a reputation for their interaction when they're coming into an anchorage and doing the anchoring. And so everyone around who is already anchored would put on their headphones to listen. I mean, we're really naughty as cruisers, but it's all part of the camaraderie of the situation. So do get to the anchorage early. If you're going to be busy, it's much better to be the audience and watching everyone coming in and trying to find their spot than actually being the show yourself. So communication, increased weather. So one of the nice things, particularly about an anchor windlass, this kind of one is, by the way, a vertical one, so we can put a road on it as well, so we can have two anchors on it, is that if the wind does suddenly change direction, you're just about to sit down for your evening drink and you think, oh, darn, how could it have done that on me? This is no longer the best anchorage. We should be around the corner. An anchor windlass just lets you take it up so quickly, move around the corner, be in the good spot for the night, put it down, and half an hour later, you're back to your drink. So there are interesting situations around the world, and some things we ran into. So the top picture is actually Tobago Keys in the Caribbean. And we've led charters down there, and we found that anchoring out like this, now we are looking to Africa. We're looking 4,000 or 5,000 miles, 4,000, I guess, to Africa. And people were freaked out. They didn't have any land to protect them. In fact, they have a very good barrier reef. In the Mediterranean, you do Med More, and so you're anchoring and docking at the same time. They also have a lot now of what they call slime lines. And these are lines that they have underwater that you can pick up and you hold, and they so you can get into the shore very straight, and often you can tie to them. So some slime lines you don't put anchors down either. They're called a slime line, of course, because they live in the water and they get slime on them. And believe me, you need your gloves, they're slimy. So coming Medmore is interesting. It used to freak our guests out on board, and it particularly freaked our guests out because we'd say, just sit. And Andy and I wouldn't say a word. He'd let out the anchor and I'd back in, and you get it. And sometimes you have to kind of push the boat either side of you away and move up the raft. But it, again, is practice makes perfect. We're up in Bonifacio in the big picture at the top, and very tight docking here in some places. And I was amazed at boats, huge boats coming out, and I thought, they're never going to make it. They're never going to turn. And then, of course, they have bow thrusters. So bow thrusters, even in BC, are becoming very, very popular. And you've, I'm sure, heard that noise of, and a bow thruster, you can really maneuver the boat. And funnily enough, you often end up steering in the opposite direction that you would when you were steering the boat and getting the boat to move sideways ways. It's quite an interesting art. I talked about electric anchor windlasses. People are really helpful if you have a problem. I particularly put this boat in the bottom picture because we were on a rally of the Eastern Mediterranean, and the guy had just bought his boat a week before, and wow, he broke down every time. So patience with some people wears a bit thin when you do that. So do the maintenance on your boat. And I would have to say a boat breaking down is the biggest turnoff to your partner too, if none of your plans work out. So knots are really important on boats. Probably the most important is a bowline. And a bowline is a great knot because you can always get it undone. There are a lot of other knots like clove hitches, and for some reason up the coast here, they often use a clove hitch on the dock. I don't like it because it jams and it gets splinters in with the way they tie on wood here. But the bowline just will never jam. The clove hitch is really useful. You tie your fenders on with that normally and then do a half hitch when you've got them in the right spot. And of course, when you are coming into a dock, always gauge the height of the dock. You might have to be high or low, or maybe there's a boat the other side, so they need them high. Half hitches, you just round turn 2 half hitches, always useful knots. You probably learnt about them earlier. Figure of 8 knots, reef knots, I used to call them. I'm sorry, not reef knots, a figure of 8. That's in the end of your sheet. Square knot or reef knot, joining ropes of equal thickness. A rolling hitch is joining, sheep bend, sorry, I'm missing some out, is joining ropes of unequal thickness. Personally, I prefer to do 2 bowlines, but on lighter line, you can use this way. A rolling hitch is a clove hitch with an extra turn on the side that you don't want to go down. So for example, I hang lines out between my shrouds and forestay to hang my laundry on to dry. And I would on the shroud do it a rolling hitch, and then that line just won't fall down to the bottom. Belaying is really interesting. If you put your mooring lines onto the cleat and immediately start doing a figure 8, they can slip if there's a weight goes by and they're really pulling tautly on it. So always do 1 turn all the way round and then start doing your figure of 8. Splicing is a good thing to learn to do. It saves you a lot of money. You either take a lesson or read a book. And then my lovely illustrator said, I have to put in my O'Hell knot. Yes, knots don't always work out. Have to tie them again, like everything else, try again. So we get on to the nitty gritty of where we're going, how can we see where we're going? And we're in the day and age of electronics. These we have on a computer, but of course we have chart plotters. I have my iPad here. I really love my iPad, by the way, because I have Navionics on it. And of course it's a touch screen. It's so easy to plot your course, either do it automatically or do a manual course, and also see the depths of the water. You can do it on your chart plotter, but it's so easy on your iPad just to set the depths where you get the different shading on the charts. We like to have paper charts. We never quite trust electronics, batteries can fail, the unit can fail, they're not great with salt water, but that's up to you. If you decide not to have paper hydrographic charts, then you need backups of your electronics on different systems. There are many other things, your VHF DSC radio. The DSC is the International Digital Selective Calling, where your distress call goes straight to the Coast Guard. You have to register for it, it's free, you have to get your own identification number, your MMSI number, and so when you press your panic button or your alert MOB button on your units, it immediately goes to the Coast Guard, and then you can also you'll talk to them on the VHF. But meanwhile, they've got absolutely all your details, so you don't have to waste time giving it to them. So knowing where you're going, looking ahead of time. The Caribbean is a place we saw people going aground so often. It was the charts are very good there. Sandbanks do move. You have to be careful. And you can see from the lower picture that if you have the sun ahead of you or behind you, you can see that brown in the water. You can see where the reef is. And people get mesmerized by electronics these days, and they aren't all accurate, believe me. And as you travel further, you'll find the Tuamotus 3 miles out. Even some places in Mexico are not accurate. They've tried to do up-to-date charts, but maybe you haven't got those. So just always, as I say, look out of the window, because that's what's really there. Your dinghy can be many sizes. It's quite good if you want to pull it up the beach, or to have a dinghy and outboard that's manageable for the two of you. Be careful with kids. Be careful they're in legal limits, and they do know how. We've seen people water skiing or boarding or whatever get seriously injured by a propeller. So you have to be careful with kids. It's funny, I took my top picture of my husband thinking, what a nice picture of him in our lovely dinghy. And it's a 11'6" dinghy. And I realized he'd gone to see the sights. It's in Antigua. But kayaks are very popular on board. I guess inflatable are great to have. They don't have the windage, but going up this coast anyway, I just love going out every day. And then you can have great parties on your dinghies. You know, you've been seeing these people in an anchorage, but nobody's been getting together. So you put the word out, hey, 6 o'clock out in the bay, bring your drinks and nibbles. So you go out one by one, you hold on to the first boat, start chatting. If they get boring, someone start up their engine, whirl the group around, you've got new people to chat to. We have made more friendships from dinghy rafts, and particularly up in Desolation and everywhere else. So weather is everything, and an important psychological thing I think about weather is to be able to agree to have a plan B. You know, you might want to get away for Friday night after work, but hey, the weather just isn't right, or it's wind against current, and it's pretty ugly out there. So hey, let's just go to that restaurant we've been meaning to try at home, or have a nice lazy evening on board, get to bed really early, and we'll leave at 6 tomorrow morning. Everything looks perfect then, and we'll do, we'll get even further than we imagine. These are the winds you get on the coast. They're katabatic winds. So they come over the mountains and come down. This one actually is in Greece, my dragon breathing fire. But we get them up the coast here. So read your cruising guides and of which anchorages that seem totally protected and calm are likely to have. They sort of come down as vertical winds. At this particular case, we'd had barely any wind coming across, and we were just coming in. My husband had had his siesta, and I called down saying, I'm taking the sails down, haven't really used them. And literally within 5 minutes, and I saw this ugly cloud coming, and within 5 minutes, we had 35 knots. So canvas work. Canvas is important. It's important to keep you dry. It's important to keep the sun off you, but it's also important when you're at anchor to be able to have wind and ventilation through, particularly in a hot climate. On the other hand, it's important to have an enclosed cockpit if you're going up north here. I said yesterday when we went to Alaska, when I stepped out of the cockpit in this enclosure, I felt I was going from the tropics to the Arctic at times. So it's worth the money. Down below, do have a comfortable boat, good size berths. I like 5-inch cushions. Build in as much storage as you can. If you're going longer term cruising, you'll certainly need it with your provisioning. You may have a lee cloth going down the side as well. Heads, my wish list is to have a separate shower stall, but we had fun with our head. Our fiberglass sink started getting a leak. So in Mexico, we bought these wonderful Mexican sink and mugs, and then anti-painted the toilet seat to match. And we built in extra lockers, and toilet paper is bulky, towels are bulky. The galley, again, depending on how long you're going for, how far, you need a really good functioning galley. Storage, accessible storage is important. Put catches on everything so things can't go flying. Keeping warm. If you keep warm, you're certainly going to help in not getting seasick, keeping warm and busy or lying below. Flotation is important. In a lot of Canada, the water is very cold, certainly as is at BC. And so you need to be prepared if you did go overboard. If you're going to sail, say the Hecate Strait, and it's going to be rough, you need good life harnesses. We usually use inflatable ones. I can't stress enough how getting cold will lead to debilitation and, as I say, seasickness. Keeping ahead, preventative maintenance. I'm complaining to Andy, the single sideband radio, which goes thousands of miles, isn't transmitting properly. And that's why he's up on the solar panels at the moment. Solar panels, even locally, are really useful. So what about seasickness? Well, seasickness is a really difficult thing, and it's hard to understand how debilitating it is if you don't get seasick. Sadly, my husband doesn't, except if he's in the engine room and it's really rough. And then he looks so green when he comes out. I haven't the heart to say, now, I want you to savor how you feel, because that's how I often feel. So it certainly helps, and it certainly helped me defeat it. Sadly, no glass of wine the night before, no caffeine, highly acidic foods or extravagant foods. Any rich foods will just set you off, and certainly no bacon the day of. Good night's sleep is good. Quite often if you're going away and you're finishing up the work, you're really kind of stressed and you're uptight, well, just sort of calm down before you go. Making meals ahead of time, having snacks available. The best meds are Stugeron, and which sadly you can't get in Canada, but you can get through all the English-speaking world. It's Sonarazine. I do know people who've had it sent in, but if when we can travel again, anyone going to England, the Virgin Islands, or Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, you can get it there. Scopolamine patch, they're all antihistamines. You put a patch behind your ear. You've got to put it on ahead of time. I have to do it 12 hours ahead. You mustn't mix it with certain medications. Check with your pharmacist, but it will give you immunity for 3 days. Check the wave and swell forecast, particularly if you're on the West Coast or out in the ocean. Spending a night at anchor, you kind of got used to the motion. All good things. If you have to go below, just go below and lie down. Don't get talked into below. If you are below, don't get talked into going into a locker. It's always when I'm in a lower locker and that backward wave takes me up, I think, oh, that's the end of my day. No, be very strict about that. So then you've got all the things to enjoy. Wow, there's a wonder in our ocean. We've got so much to see wherever you are. I just love the sea otters here when I get on the West Coast. The orcas, we had this big dorsal fin you can see in the bottom picture here. That whale actually dove under our boat in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Dolphins come around the boat everywhere in the world. Wonderful things we can catch. Make sure you get your fishing license, whether it's a spot prawns, lobster. Duncan's got a great sized fish. We use the squirts of alcohol to kill it. Works beautifully. No fuss and bother, no bashing it over the head. Food is an adventure. Wow, we have great farmers markets now wherever you go. But you may go down and be down in the Caribbean or other places, South Pacific, and see things you've never seen before. So ask the market ladies how to cook them and get into a whole new adventure. Anyone interested in gardens? Wow, the flowers to be found. Wildflowers, tropical flowers. It's the same with birds, ocean birds, and that frigate bird joined us for 3 days before we got to Galapagos. The scarlet ibises were in Venezuela, and 50 minutes later, that whole tree was just red as they all came into roost. They eat a crustacea that makes them that color. The toucans, the parrots, the lorikeets in Australia. Pets are very popular on board the boat. I was saying yesterday, if you get north here of Desolation, the vegetation comes right down to the coast and you're kind of bushwhacking to get into the interior. Not so easy to find somewhere to walk a dog. But people have lots of dogs, cats. We had birds going around the world. These are our little lovebirds. Kids love boating, whatever age. They remember more, of course, when they're a wee bit older. We always celebrated anything we could. So I think the bottom, King Neptune, we're just crossing the equator. Oh, the ritual of ripping up your school books at the end of the year when you're doing school on board. And we did correspondence for 6 years with our kids and it worked beautifully. And then joining in events, we have wonderful ones, our islands here, wonderful ones going around the world. Every community does something. It's just lovely to see people turning out, whether it's the carnival, these little kids are in Haiti going to school, or the girls down below who did us a splendid dancer in Egypt. This is Greek independence, and down in Antigua. Kids are great, and kids are great for photography. And very often in more remote parts of the world, the kids wanted their photograph. And then when they had eased up and weren't so inhibited, their parents wanted to come as well. And we could photograph anything we wanted to. Getting together with other people, the camaraderie of cruising. If you're nervous about anything, you can chat. You'll always find someone who's nervous about the same thing. People in the bottom picture particularly are all with partners who hadn't cruised a whole lot before, or most of them are. Going cruising as a family, it's absolutely terrific. Lots of rallies you can join. We were fortunate in joining in many places, or we've actually got BC at the top. This was in Syria, I think, of all things. We were on the East Med Yacht Rally, and here we are in Ambon in Indonesia. All great times, great events by the locals, really a fun time to arrive. And again, the camaraderie of other people. So some useful techniques. Introducing to boating that's really positive. Don't scare them their first trip out. Learning fundamental skills so they can both be independent. Combining skills so it's all a good workable team. Developing good hand signals or having communication between the bow and stern. Understanding each other, and maybe a second try is needed. Increasing skills by attending courses together, and probably acknowledging you're not always going to agree. I mean, you don't in real life, so why should you on a boat? So lots of things to dream about for hopefully next year when we can all get away. And meanwhile, I've of course got a lot of books to help you. So the Cruising for Cars, which is most pertinent for cruising for couples, is just everything we could think about for cruising lifestyle. So it takes you from a beginner to, in fact, a circumnavigator. So whether you're looking at different electronics you're going to buy, whether you're looking at engines or fishing, or it may be the techniques for living on board, it may be the dangers, it may be provisioning and storage, it may be just looking at how you're going to afford all those electronic charts, how you're going to do your banking, and what's safe. In terms of going on the internet. What about the anxieties and how you can get over them? What about if you have a fear of being out of sight of land? How do you get over that? What kind of boat you buy? Andy was a yacht broker, so we go through all the different boats, like the pros and cons of different rudders and skegs and things like that. Pros and cons of mono and multi-hulls. Maybe you want a water maker. What kind of different sails and furling systems. It's all in there, updated. I did it at the end of last year, and it's also in an ebook form. And you can go on my website, or you can go on the boat show site and get in there, which will take you to the website. If cruising from here, comfortable cruising, 2 chapters take you up north to Alaska, and then we head down to Mexico, cruise the Mexican coast, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and through the canal, a great experience. And then we come up the Western Caribbean, and also have gone to Cartagena, come up the Western Caribbean, and lovely Belize, Guatemala, the Yucatan, and then up and do all the eastern seaboard, also very interesting, historically interesting, and come up to Maine and Nova Scotia. We were going to go up to Newfoundland, but our youngest son was in a championship in Kingston, Ontario. So we left the boat and headed back to help out there sometime in the future, hopefully. Just cruising is when we decided to do longer term cruising. And we lived in BC, but we sold our boat here and we bought another one in Europe. And we decided with young kids, Jamie was only 2, 6 and 9 when we left. I'd go to the Mediterranean, and if the kids were okay, we'd go over to the Caribbean. Well, that just started. We ended up getting lured to Australia, being Canada's tall ship, if you can believe it, in the tall ships events. And then we carried on with still cruising, going all through the Indian Ocean, Africa and Asia, and finally back to Florida. So lots of choice. The narrative certainly has inspired a lot of people to go cruising, and Cruising for Cars is incredibly comprehensive but readable, and some great cartoons. So I'm through now, so I'm happy to entertain some questions.
Thank you, Liza. Yes, so please put your questions in the Q&A box for Liza. If there's anything you would like to know or learn more about, we are happy to have Liza answer them live. One question I have, Liza, is are there any new books in the works right now?
Well, I've just finished putting them all into ebooks, and no, I decided that actually I probably will continue with articles. I'm a bit stymied at the minute, not having been able to travel for the last year, but I do a column in Pacific Yachting, which is quite random in what it covers. It may be technical, it may be about the local coast, it might be about fishing regulations, it might be how to call the Coast Guard. So I've been doing that for, 2 years, 2+ years, and it comes out every other month. So people are interested in reading that. I think they'd find it informative. So I have a question here. I can see it. Thank you, Maureen. How do you pay for things, credit card or cash? If cash, which currency? Paying for things is a very interesting question. We usually use credit cards now when we travel, and we get money from ATMs. But you need to be really careful about that, and careful if you are going online to check your account. So an ATM in certain parts you go into, they maybe you ask for $200 equivalent in cash, and nothing appears. And people have learned that actually that often is debited from your account. So you need to check your account, but don't do it if you go on a public source. You really need a private source with a password, because otherwise, if it's a public source, they can take all your credit details and get into your account. So that's important. You also need credit cards on different systems, particularly on the Cirrus and the Plus system, like Visa and MasterCard, is really a good way of going. Don't limit it to, and a lot of people don't take debit cards. If you're overseas, what currency to carry? Most of the world would take US dollars. If you're more around Europe and European-oriented countries, then euros. And it's good to have a mix of small and large denominations. The reason being, if you want to pay for something when you've just arrived, you can use a small denomination. Maybe a store will take it. But if you want to change money at the bank, they charge you per note. So if you're changing a lot of $1 bills, you don't end up with a very good exchange rate. So, yeah, so, and we always have some sort of cash on board hidden in a good place, of course. Okay, oh my goodness, I'm getting confused. Let's go up. What can you say about Power Group cruising on the West Coast? Go for it. I mean, I'm a sailor purist, and I can't ever see going to a power. Oh, Andy and I ran a powerboat in the Caribbean for 12 months, actually, a year. And it was all Sears Roebuck, very comfortable. But basically, we're pretty windless here. But it can get pretty tricky if you're crossing the strait, and wind against current isn't good for powerboats either, and you can really get tossed around. So powerboats will always be more cautious. The powerboats going, say, across Cape Caution always will wait longer than the sailboats, but either are just great. From all the places you've traveled, what was the place that really surprised you for either better or for worse? Oh, we enjoy everywhere we go to. There's some lovely surprises. We were in Little Mopelia, which is the end of the Society Islands, French Polynesia. And we went in there, and it was sort of like a mini Galapagos, which we hadn't expected. And then we met Michel, and Michel was the local, the only one on that atoll. And he gave us a fantastic evening. He taught us how to make proper coconut milk. He sang up the evening away. We had parrotfish we wouldn't normally eat. He taught us how to get the leber lobster, which are only where there's the huge swell on the outer reef. So you, as the swell goes out, you have to lean over very precariously and get these lobster. And it was just great. The place Andy probably won't go back to is the Ukraine, because we nearly left with one official who was determined he was going to bribe us. But no, we pretty well we enjoy everywhere we go. Do you have a favorite marina in BC? That would be a dangerous question for me to answer. I'm sorry, because we're sort of in the business here, and everyone is there to make a living. I think marinas do a great job in BC. There's some marinas that are great for staying longer periods of time if you're overwintering. There are many. I'm a member of the Ocean Cruising Club, and there are many in Sydney, and they enjoy being down there. But there's so many good marinas as you go up the coast, and they do a fantastic job. Their season is very limited, and do make sure when you go up the coast that whether it's a marina shop or another shop, that you do go and spend money in local places. Probably everything costs a lot more. Understandably, they've had to get it there. And as I say, their season is so short. So unless we become patrons, and they're going to disappear. So it's good to stock up on a lot of things before you go, but then get into the adventure of, oh, let's do a mini shop here, and what have they got? Any negative experiences, pirates, theft, or violence? Not really. We had theft in Turkey before the season, but we went to the Goulet, which is their big tourist boats now, dock, and we were told not to go in, and had friends on board who didn't lock the boat. So it's important to lock your boat. And do listen to the locals, what's safe and not safe. We had someone tried to steal our outboard, which was on the stern pulpit in Zanzibar, of all places, off Africa. And we'd been told by locals it was safe to anchor there. But other people earlier in the harbor had been robbed. Anyway, we heard a big sort of thump through the boat in the middle of the night, and our youngest son called out, who was sleeping back there. And these people had tried to get, locals had tried to get our outboard. Anyway, they didn't get the outboard. We thought we disguised it. We turned it inside. Anyway, in the end, we were all up on deck, and Andy stayed up on deck. Because, I know what happened. Andy surprised them. And so they jumped into the water, and they left their dugout canoe, which were family heirlooms, tied to our boat. So Andy stayed on deck, and in the next morning, and they were trying to get back. So the next morning, we were looking around, and all they'd managed to steal was our bag of garbage. So we were quite grateful to them in the end. So what do you do with your stuff that you don't take with you sailing? Yeah, isn't that amazing? When we came back from circumnavigating, wow, there was a lot of stuff we took on board. Well, fortunately, we have a house and a garage. It becomes a problem. You do get a lot of stuff, and you have to find somewhere to put it, whether you rent it or whether it's in your house or whether it's your friend's garage. But I will say that there's a lot of stuff that becomes obsolete when you're cruising. For example, I never used a pressure cooker. I found it took more propane to come to steam than it did for me to cook my vegetables lightly as I like them. And so I'd rather take the space for a big pan for crab or lobster. So I put that as good garbage. I put it beside good garbage, I think, in Tonga. And so always remember that one person's trash, as they say, is another person's treasure. Okay, any more questions? No more questions. What I will say is give it a shot. However reticent you are about going cruising, just give it a shot. It just it opens a whole new world. 25 years ago, you inspired my family to go cruising in the Caribbean, changed our lives, inspired so much more. Thank you. Oh, just as I was saying, where is a good place to look for a catamaran? Oh, I mean, you can, the places where the most catamarans are, I mean, if you're not ordering new, I just met a yacht broker a couple of days ago who's just going to meet the ship that had the lagoons in. If you're not going, you need to go to areas where they have a lot of cats in charters. So primarily the Caribbean. You can go to St. Martin, Antigua, go to the Bahamas also in their bases because they cycle the boats after 5 years. When you're thinking of a cat, think of a lot of things like where are you going to moor it? Most marinas charge you double. How are you going to haul out? Facilities get very limited for haulage as well. And do look into that seasickness factor, because I know a lot of friends who had catamarans, they had families, they thought they were perfect. But actually, when they're out of a very benign area, and BC is a very benign area, but when they were out of the benign area, their kids got too seasick forward. And the motion is very jerky when you're at sea. And for anyone who's a racer or was like myself, you can never get the boat in the groove because you're on two different wave systems. So they're a great platform for when you're at anchor. They're not such a good experience for when you're on the ocean. But they're very, very popular charter boats. So go to the charter areas. You won't see so many in the Med because moorage is expensive there.
Liza, we had one question in the chat asking, do you ever worry about pirates?
No, you do a lot of research. You know, when you're out there cruising, people would always say, oh, don't you get bored? You're far too busy. You're looking at weather probably 3 times a day. Well, I mean, the weather channels give you weather 3 times a day, and you're figuring out the best places to go to. And then with that, you're also figuring out what are the safe places to go to. And wherever you cruise, there are areas where there seems to be more theft. Believe me, it's often from other yachtsmen. It's not from local people. There'll be other theft, or maybe there's some local people who haven't been so friendly, or and so there's so many other places to go and you avoid them. Politically, you can find out a lot what's going on by your radio, you know, listening to local radio. And we did that. We used to listen to BBC World Service, which is localized, just as we have it here in North America. But say the Caribbean would localize it. And the other thing we loved about the single sideband radio and being on radio nets was that there would be a net every morning. And so there would be check-in by people who are ahead of you who'd say, oh, by the way, don't go in here on Mondays because the officials are really nasty, but the Tuesday guys are great. Or they'll really delay you till the lunch hour and try and charge you overtime. Or don't go in this port, go in this port as your first port of entry. So you get an awful lot. It's all a learning information as you go. Of course, you always all hear about the positive things. So guys, there's a jump up, you know, steel band here tonight. Or I've got this for sale, or I no longer need this. Do you want it? Or you say, I've got an engine problem. Oh, no worries, I'm an engine mechanic, I'll come and help you. So there's a huge amount of interchange of all information, but it certainly helps with security. And we never worried about pirates. So certain areas, you know, the coast of Somalia was really bad, and unfortunately all because of illegal fishing, really, and they were so poor. It's okay, but people go in groups to go through the Red Sea when they're on the move. I'm not sure if anyone's going in there. There's certain places in the world people are held up at the moment and can't move on. The coast of West Africa, Nigeria isn't good, but most cruisers don't go there. But going through the Red Sea was a big one because it takes you into the Mediterranean rather than going around South Africa. Petty theft is on the rise. People know what our instruments are and they would like them. And so do be careful if you're leaving the boat and you can take off your ray marine instruments or radar, whatever make you have, and you can take the sharp plotters and put them down below. Do always lock your boat when you go ashore. I mean, we represent huge wealth, and in a lot of areas of the world, people will always hoist their dinghy out of water at night, always take their outboard in, always lock the dinghy to a dock when they go ashore, and lock the outboard to the dinghy or the boat, wherever it is. So you take those precautions. So petty theft is definitely on the rise. And as I say, we represent huge wealth to many people around the world. But otherwise, we did our homework. And we would never go into really remote areas, whatever reputation they had, without buddy boating, or very seldom. I guess we did a bit in the Indian Ocean, but we could have come from the moon in the Indian Ocean air at that time. And we had kids on board, and you'd never put your kids in danger. But the world loves kids. It's great. You get great opportunities.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Liza, for the great presentation, and thank you for joining us today. We are interested in your feedback, either on this seminar or if you have ideas on topics that you would like us to cover in the future. Simply click on the Evaluate tab located just above the seminar description and complete the form. After the show, all attendees will also receive a post-show survey. Be sure to check out all of the features at the Vancouver International Boat Show Virtual. If you have a question, you can check out our info booth. We also want to thank our sponsor, Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales. So have a great day at the boat show, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Do take a look at the books. Do get out cruising. Enjoy.